go live and then see if the YouTube does the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should be live. Yeah, we are indeed live. Hello, everyone. I am Reija. This is my channel, The Book Finch. And if you are here, I'm glad you have found this stream. And I am joined today by my lovely friend, Jena. Jena, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jena. My channel name is Bibliofilth here on BookTube. And let's do the formal intro. For those who don't know me, I mostly read science fiction and fantasy, as well as quite a bit of comic books as well.
You also read a bunch of gay stuff.
Yes, yeah, including this, among other things. Yes, and I actually have a few videos now on my channel for gay comics specifically. So if you're looking for queer comics of various varieties, I've got some recommendations for that as well. Not entirely relevant to what we're talking about today, but somewhat related.
Jena's channel will be linked in the live show description, so be sure to check her out. And as a connoisseur of gay media, Jena is one of the perfect people to talk about this book, Silk and Steel, which was the first book for the book club, the Shorts and Sorcery book club, where we read all things short fiction, anthologies, and magazines. And let's start by going over our expectations. Like, this is billed, what it says on the tin is Silk and Steel, a queer, speculative adventure anthology. And I'm going to read the description in the back. Princess and swordswoman, lawyer and motorcyclist, scholar and barbarian. There are many ways to be a heroine. In this anthology, 17 authors find new ways to pair one weapon-wielding woman and one whose strengths lie in softer skills. So based on that description, I want to talk a little bit of our expectations going into this anthology before we actually started reading and knew what it was all about. So, Jena, what were your thoughts?
Well, based off of the cover especially and the summary, I was expecting this to be pretty fluffy and lighthearted. A lot of bodyguard and princess type stories, again, just based off of this cover, which is very much that trope. And I was also expecting some Utena, Princess Utena influences, because that's kind of like the OG of the warrior warrior princess. And
this whole cover for me, like with the epaulets and everything, like had this like a revolutionary girl Utena Anthe vibe, and also Rose of Versailles, like Lady Oscar, that kind of feel. So I definitely get you on that. I would also say that I was expecting a lot of like queer joy, a lot of like not reveling in too much angst.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think we got that.
Yeah, I would say also with that, I was expecting a lot of the stories in here were going to be in settings where queer is the status quo, or there isn't a taboo around it. I guess that goes into that queer joy, but not having to deal with all of the real world, I don't know if drama is the right word, but you know what I'm talking about. All of the nastiness in the real world that does unfortunately come with being queer. I was expecting that this story was not going to have, or this anthology was not going to have any of that in it. It was just going to be fluffy, queer.
Yeah, I was also expecting that if there was gonna be a sort of obstacles for our main characters, that they were not going to be like sort of systemic, but instead of like on a more individual level, like as you said, that these worlds, I was expecting not to have too much of like the world itself, I thought was not going to be too much of an obstacle for the main characters. There were a few stories though in here where the world definitely was the antagonist, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think that's about all for the expectation parts. Now let's go to the actual meat of the thing.
Yes.
Did you like this anthology?
I did. I enjoyed it. I gave it my standard rating that I give basically every short story anthology, which is 3 stars. Because you usually have some stories that work really well for you, some stories that don't work really well. And I was looking back at the individual ratings that I gave each story in this book, and overall it seemed to be kind of a 3-star. Like it wasn't leaning one way or the other, right? Where it's like every story I didn't like or every story I loved. It was a mix. So I would say overall I definitely did enjoy this, but obviously, like any anthology, there's going to be some stories that didn't work as well and some that were really good.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just quickly gonna hello, nice of you to join. And I see that we have some people here watching, so don't be afraid to shout out in the comments and ask questions and comment as we go along. If you participated in the read along, and also if you are interested in picking up this book and haven't read it before, don't be afraid to comment and shout out in the comment section.
If you're in the comments, if you have any recommendations for things with a similar vibe to this or a Utena, that would be great. Please feel free to share, because we're definitely looking for more stuff like this.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure that you are too.
I mean, I personally feel that this kind of how would I say this? Like, I didn't realize how starved I was for this kind of like more angst-free fluff, just sort of like, you know, these worlds where these people just get to be who they are, do their thing, have adventures. Like, I have been reading so much of like queer struggle. So it was kind of a nice surprise to just have adventures.
Yes.
And I think that also goes to show, like, for example, I did mark which my favorite stories were. And I noted that pretty much all of my favorite stories had to do with a sort of humorous bent. There was one notable exception to that. But for the most part, a lot of the stories that I most enjoyed were ones where there was a lot of like humor and it was more tongue-in-cheek. But on the flip side, a few of my most hated stories were those where the humor just kind of went way overboard from like the enjoyable territory to like cringe.
Yes.
So it was definitely a fine line.
Same. Yeah. And humor is so hard because it's so personal. And so that's to be expected, that there's going to be stories where it's like, oof, if the humor just doesn't work for you, then it's no.
Yeah.
Then the whole thing doesn't work. But yeah, I would describe a lot of these as like romps, if that sort of vibe and atmosphere. Like, there definitely is adventure in these, but a lot of them don't feature like mortal peril. It's more of the fun side of adventure, or even when there is like conflict. For the most part in these, there's never a worry that the characters are going to get seriously hurt or even die, with the exception of a couple of stories, obviously. But for the most part, they're just
Yeah, I feel like this was a very like low stress type of anthology.
Yep.
And obviously some stories work better than others. How would you say as a whole, like looking at things like these being specifically short stories and short fiction, and short fiction works in a kind of different scope. Like an author has to be very mindful of how they are going to interpret the scope of the assignment essentially, and how what kind of tool sets they're going to utilize. How would you say that the authors fared in doing that, in accomplishing a compact and still complete short story? And did you have any authors who clearly had more experience, like you saw immediately that this author had more experience in that?
Yes. I would say that overall, I'm just kind of glancing to the side too because I've got some notes on the specific stories in here. A vast majority of these did feel like they were self-contained short stories. There were just a couple where it, to me, felt like the author doesn't have as much experience doing short stories, or it felt like, damn, this really feels like this is part of a bigger book that was just kind of shoved in here. But again, that's kind of with the anthology, you're going to have some stories that do that. Also, thanks, Rebecca. I see the comment about Distant Gardens, which is a lesbian hope punk and solar punk. That sounds really cool.
Also, if you have any recommendations for books similar to this one, please keep them coming. And at the end of this live, I want to do like shout out for all other kind of media related to stuff like the similar premise to this one. I would say that there are also a couple of stories where the author, namely Yoon-Ha Lee and Ellen Kushner, utilized their own worlds that they had already created. Like Yoon-Ha Lee has a short story that seems to be a kind of a sequel or a prequel to the Machineries of Empire series in this, which I have not read. But I thought that particular story, it kind of teases that world, but still worked pretty well as its own thing. And then Ellen Kushner obviously did a story set in Riverside, which I thought was one of my favorite stories in this collection. But I also thought that that story wasn't too out there for people who haven't picked up Riverside books. Like if you have read the books, you will get like sweet Easter eggs and kind of like nuggets of fan service from that world. But if you haven't read the stories, I think that it still worked pretty well as a standalone.
And I haven't read them, and I didn't have any issues with that one, with the world building and understanding where we were at. So yeah, I feel like most of the authors that were writing for this do have experience writing short stories, so that definitely did come through when you were reading it. There were just a couple that was like, pacing wise.
Sure. There was, I think, also a few of the short stories kind of whetted my appetite for more.
Yes.
With that, I want to go like over. Basically, I want us to go over our 3 least favorite and 3 favorite short stories, like 3 each. And let's start with the least favorite ones, because I think it's always better to kind of end on a high note.
Yes.
So let's get the rants out of the way first. So you go first. What was one of your least favorite stories? And let's see if I have the same one.
Yes, I'm looking at my notes here. So definitely Positively Medieval, I think, was my least favorite of the whole. Which that one, for people who haven't read this, or just as a refresher, if you have super quick summary. We have a modern day setting with fantasy creatures in it, and our main character is she's a troll, right? Or is she a goblin?
Yeah, she's a troll, and the other main character is basically a DoorDash
yes,
courier.
Yeah. And our troll ends up going to, or is attempting to go to college, and wacky hijinks ensue. But that was one where the humor didn't work. And I also was like, no, there's way too many real world, like there was a lot of COVID references in that one.
Yeah, the story is kind of set in a sort of near future world where magic has, sort of come back and stuff. But also I think that it draws so much on like Dungeons and Dragons references, which was my problem with another short story in this collection that I really despised, or not despised. I didn't like it. That's like, it's a difference. But Positively Medieval was like one of the stories in this collection where I thought Positively Medieval by Caitlin Zivanovic, I might as well call out the name.
I wrote it. Yep.
But also, JR liked Positively Medieval, so this is actually great, because I just think that it goes to show that everyone has different tastes, and that is completely okay. We're not saying that the story itself is bad. We're saying that we didn't personally gel with it. So I want to know, JR, what did you like about the story? Like, what was your favorite thing about Positively Medieval? Because, like, for me, what I didn't like about it was the sort of childishness of the humor.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the stories where I did end up really liking the humor were more like snarky. I don't know if I want to name drop, but that sort of like Joss Whedon type of humor.
Oh no!
Like, you know.
I know. I know what you mean, because I don't think it. Okay. I don't think it's controversial to say that many queer people, especially those who speak English and had access to English TV programs, are heavily influenced by Joss Whedon's works, regardless of who he is as a person, which is a pretty nasty piece of work. But like, basically, I'm generalizing here, but it's very difficult to find a queer person that has never seen Buffy or Angel or Firefly.
And considering that his newest show, which he was a part of, The Nevers, is incredibly queer.
Yeah.
Has like trans and non-binary characters and all of that. Like, it's like a surprise that Joss Whedon actually wrote that. But we are definitely going on a tangent here. But
we don't need to go
like
down
there's
that
like a distinct like line with the humor, a spectrum, if you will, of what is of where it works and where it doesn't for different people. I'm a sucker for female protagonists as certain races like trolls, goblins. Yeah, because if you think about it, trolls and goblins are often either like incredibly like genderless, that they are just like obstacles for the main character, so they don't actually like have characters, and even then they are coded as very like masculine. So if you think about, for example, the trolls in The Hobbit that turn into stone, those are coded very masculine. So yeah, I get your point that it kind of subverts the whole idea of what a troll or goblin is. So yeah, I definitely see that. I kind of feel that I can go next because this is a nice segue for my next story that I did not like, which was the epic 5th wedding anniversary of Zayn the Barbarian and Tikka the Accountant by Elizabeth Davies.
Oh, this was one where we had division, because I gave this 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I did not like this.
Yeah.
And I didn't like this for the exact same reason that I didn't like Positively Medieval, is that the humor was just a little too out there for me.
Yeah.
It kind of crossed that line from being like more subtle and snarky and character focused and going more for that. Can you spot the reference of the pop culture thing and the D&D thing that we're doing here?
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
But I feel like the main characters kind of had that same dynamic in both of those stories. Like Positively Medieval has that, you know, you have kind of like what's the word? Like for example, Zayn the Barbarian as a character is very much that brute force barbarian archetype. And then in Positively Medieval, the character is, you expect them to be this kind of lumbering brute force person, but they are more pragmatic and sort of straight-laced. And then I feel like you have the physical archetypes of the characters, but the actual personalities are switched around in these stories, if you get me.
Yeah.
Which I actually think it's really interesting. Still, neither of these stories was, as Shannon from That's So Poe would say, not my style.
Yeah, I think the Positively Medieval, it had a lot of those jokes where the main character misunderstands something that we as the audience understand. So the example is she thinks that the DoorDash person is a knight. Because of the
but
name.
She is a night courier.
Right, yeah.
Night shift worker.
So she's like, yeah. And there's a lot of that type of humor, and that's just not, I don't find that really funny. Like a couple of them, it's like, but after a certain point, I just get annoyed. I'm like, okay, I got it.
Yeah, the misunderstanding was kind of like, okay, it's so drawn out that you just kind of want it to end.
Yeah.
But then I will say that in the wedding anniversary story, it's very straightforward. It starts at a certain point and it just plows on through to the end. But I just like the sort of like reference heavy aspect of the humor.
Yeah.
Kind of.
That one kind of reminded me of, well, I just forgot his name, but the guy that wrote Bloody Rose and his other novel.
Nicholas Eames. Nicholas Eames.
Yes, the humor reminded me a lot of his stories, which are also like pretty divisive. People tend to either really like that or really hate that. Worth noting.
I have actually read Kings of the Wild.
Yeah.
I haven't read Bloody Rose, but I'm actually more interested in Bloody Rose, mostly probably because I like lesbians more than I like grumpy old men, even though I myself am a grumpy old man. Or I feel like one. But that sort of like referential tongue-in-cheek humor is very like hit or miss.
Yeah.
Do you have another, like you have basically picked Positively Medieval. I picked the Epic 5th Anniversary. What's your second?
Yes.
Second choice.
Let's see. Maybe we could get spicy here and have some conflict, because I did not like The Sweet Tooth of Angwar Beck, and I know that's one that you really enjoyed.
No.
Yep.
Why?
Honestly, this one, like very early on, it had a joke where, okay, so there's the crux of this story is it's a flashback to a duel that our character had. And the reason why the duel gets started is because she is challenging a noblewoman to a duel, and she challenges her to a duel by saying another noble person has accused you of being a man in a dress. There's a joke like that, and that just put such a sour taste in my mouth for the whole thing. So that was a huge reason why I didn't really like that story, because it's like it's kind of mean for a fluffy anthology.
I get that, but this just goes as part of the world that the story is set in.
Yes.
Because the privilege of the sword, which is basically a precursor to this story, has Catherine the Duchess Tremontaine, basically her uncle, who is the Duke, fosters her and forces her to dress in men's clothing and take on this, like, basically to train as a swordsman in order to basically he will make her his heir if he will do these very outlandish, outrageous tasks, and she's there basically against her will. So it's kind of like a sort of
like it makes more sense in context.
It makes more sense in terms of the character, because like a sort of like a crux of the book was that some people mistook her as a man because she was not allowed to wear women's clothing and would have to attend all of these parties and stuff in men's wardrobe, basically. And Ellen Kushner, obviously, I think that is, especially considering like the current climate in terms of like politics and stuff. It's like it's probably one of those things that should have been like opened up a bit more.
Right.
Like you need to sort of explore that thought process.
Right. Especially if someone hasn't, like, I came into this completely unfamiliar with the source material, so it just struck me as a,
I can see that, definitely. I feel like I didn't personally have issue with it, because I also, like, the character who goes in and makes the claim is obviously very uncomfortable that she has to put her on the spot, and sort of it's acknowledged that it's a ridiculous thing to do no matter what. But yeah, I completely see your point there, that for others it might feel like a stab in a sense for something that they feel vulnerable about.
Right.
So in that sense, I get what you mean. But yeah, I just thought that in terms of scope, this particular story understood the assignment perfectly well. It didn't try to tell this perfect love story between these characters. It was just like, oh, you have a one-night stand because of this, like,
it was like a moment
adrenaline rush encounter. So I just thought that was a nice take on it. Yes. Considering that a lot of these stories in here involve a lot of, I would say, pining. Yes. There's a lot of pining in this anthology.
Yes. That was also one of the few ones with dueling, where we have the two love interests dueling against each other, which doesn't happen often in this collection. Actually, that might have been the only story where that really happened. But
yeah, I feel that as well.
So what's your pick for the next one that you didn't like?
I hope that you are not sour to Ellen Kushner, because I still want everyone to read Swords Points.
No, not at all. It was just one of the things where it's like the short story itself was like, And I think for me, that one, it didn't have a ton of draw outside of the one specific duel that we're witnessing, because again, I'm not familiar with the world, so I could track what was happening, but it felt like just like, oh, this is a fantasy setting without that additional context of
and it is also like the shortest story in the whole collection.
Yes,
hands down, it is the shortest story. Which I have to admit that when I got to that story and I noticed that it was so short, I was a little bit disappointed because I want, Ellen Kushner is one of my favorite writers. Like, she has written my favorite book of all time. So I was like, I needed to have like some Ellen Kushner feels, and then the story was just a tiny sliver of a thing.
Yeah, so, I'm trying to find it because I actually have the book in front of me. So like, I mean, I want to say it was like definitely under 10 pages. It was pretty short.
It was like 10 at most. Whereas there were some stories here that I like. Well, I didn't hate them, but I wasn't like super in love with them. That were long.
Oh wow, yeah. It was barely 8 pages. So yeah,
it was short. But I also think that it managed to it managed to set the tone and set the characters in that amount of time.
Yeah.
Or at least the character of Angvar Beck. You kind of like, maybe not Catherine, but I feel like you weren't supposed to get her as much. This was the story of Angvar Beck.
Yes.
And I think that I definitely got the feeling of her personality, like what makes her tick, and like what her insecurities are, and stuff like that. So I feel like she came out of that story as a fully realized character, even though I would say like this wasn't actually like my most favorite story in the collection. I did like it a lot, but like I like when I go into the stories, I'm looking for that dynamic between the two characters, and I want them to be on equal footing, so to speak, both in terms of like agency and action, but like the characterization. There were a few stories in this collection where I felt that the characterization favored the other character over the other one in the pair.
Yes. Yeah, it was usually especially the first person POV ones are the ones that are like very closely tied to one character in the third person. Those tended to favor the main character, the POV character, over the other character, which makes sense. I've seen that before in a lot of short stories take that approach because it's harder to get development for two characters in such a short span. So it's usually easier to focus on one character. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, going to the next one that I didn't like personally was What Finds You in the Deep.
That was going to be my pick for the next one I didn't like.
Yeah. It was just meh.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, here's the thing, like the whole premise of the story hinges on like there's too many variables where that whole encounter would have just been like it didn't happen because like it just was very contrived. And that's like the whole, like when you realize what is happening, like at the beginning it was like, okay, they're going to explore a cave, there's some magic happening, there's some nice allusions to like, you know, maybe it takes place in our world, who knows, you know,
right.
Like this sort of like past with like technology. I assume the worldwide connection was the internet and stuff. But once you realize why they are actually there, it becomes very like you just it sort of like pulls the wool from over like and you start you sort of start going like, wait, what? Wait, so she did this and she had to do and it sort of like unravels the entire thing and makes it feel like these characters are not competent, you know?
Yeah.
So not my favorite. I will say that most of the stories in this collection, I would say, are fairly well written, though. Like even the ones that I didn't personally enjoy, have like a quality of writing to them, where the prose was never the thing that was like, ugh, you know.
Yes.
Even though there were, even in the stories where there was like a first person narration, which is, as you know, one of my biggest pet peeves. I hate first person narration so much. I am always like third person past tense for life.
Yeah. I don't have as much of a. Well, I was going to say that, and then I'm like, yeah, actually, I do kind of dislike first person. It depends on the story.
I mean, you can like first person. It is not my preferred. Like maybe it's my stint with, you know, epic fantasy and stuff. Like I don't want to be too closely related with the person like in their head. Most of my favorite books have been written in third person, or some of them in second person. Like, I actually prefer second person narration to first person narration.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a bold
salty, spicy take, I know. But yeah, I actually don't have a lot to say about what finds you in the deep. I just thought that it was... I think it did the crime of being boring. And that's its like biggest crime. I didn't feel like the pull... Like, these characters were supposed to be like old lovers, like, you know, they had this thing going on, a relationship, an established relationship. But I actually didn't really get to feel like what these people felt about each other. Like, there was this feel of pining, but I didn't get a sense of the actual relationship. If that makes sense.
No, totally. And agree.
Yeah. Because we had like two where we agreed, I would say. Should this next one be the last one before we move on to the best stories that the stories we thought were best? So do you want to do the honors of choosing the last? Not shitty, but not like the favorite story.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the next one I was gonna say was in the salt crypts of
Jarel, I think. Jarel.
I am not French. I cannot pronounce the French words. Which I felt similarly about to What Finds You in the Deep. Not that the stories are the same, but I was just bored by it. So I don't really have a lot of profound thoughts on that one. I just noted that as one of my least favorite ones, and actually one that I ended up DNFing.
Yeah, I read it from start to finish. It was I didn't hate it or dislike it enough to put it in the least favorites, but it was definitely in the meh category for me. I feel like it didn't. First of all, the story itself starts out of a straight up conflict. Like, it's just like the characters are at odds with each other from the beginning. And when you do that, that actually makes it harder for you to establish a positive connection between the characters, because you have already put them at odds. So that's already a point against you, that you are putting your main pair at odds in a short story, and then you have to disentangle that mess that you put them in.
Yeah.
And I think that the story didn't really have enough time to do that. And that was actually one of the I like, it wasn't the longest story, but it was definitely on the longer side for me.
Yeah.
And it still didn't really manage to like it had a tough thing, because it had to like re-establish these characters as equals, or at least respecting each other, as well as because this is a story that has a horror twist.
Yeah.
So it also has to establish the horror element, and I feel like it kind of teetered on failing on both of those. It didn't really satisfactorily make those like re-establish these characters on a more positive footing, and also didn't really fully establish the horror aspect. Also, I still don't really get, like, I understand the impetus of the horrific thing, but the world kind of was like, what are we looking at here?
Yeah,
what
I have very much had that sense as well while reading. I never.
So I really get what you point. Get the English. I get your point.
Yes.
I just had more story. I hated Tikka the accountant and Zayn the warrior more than I liked this story. Yeah, but I feel like this is a nice stop to the negativity, and let's move on to the favorites, the best stories that we think this collection had, and we can once again do like 3 each, and depending on if we have the same choices or not.
Yes.
I can go first.
Yes.
One of my favorite stories in this collection was Eleanor Jones versus the Ruritanian Multiverse by Freya Marsk.
That was, I think, my number one favorite in the overall.
This was very fun. And this was also like, because a lot of the stories that where I really didn't like them, they were humorous. They had a humorous aspect. But I felt like this did the humor, like, it was more subtle.
Yeah.
And it was less about references and more about, like, it was incidental humor.
Yeah.
Resulting from the, like, overall actions of the main character and how she viewed the world. Also,
right.
It was nice, like, this is a sort of like epistolary story, because the main character is writing to someone about their experiences. So that was actually kind of nice. Also, I kind of got really intrigued about the world that this takes place in, the whole agency thing.
Yes.
I would like a full book about just, like, even an anthology about the agency and the various stories would be, like, you know, taking place in different multiverses and the agency agents trying to, like, you know, do the good tourism thing and stuff. I actually really enjoyed the story, and I was kind of not expecting it, because I don't usually think that this kind of story is necessarily my style. Plus, it was in first person too.
That's true.
Right after I said that I usually dislike first person so much. And at least, let me check. I want to say that at least 2 of the stories that I really liked were first person stories.
Oh.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, I loved this one for all the reasons you said. I also liked the romance itself, which I think for this story, the romance wasn't necessarily the main focus, but it still felt realistic. Like we were given enough information where I felt like realistically I could understand why these 2 characters had an attraction to each other, and it wasn't tried to, or it didn't try to make it like super angsty or like, you know, we're each other's soulmates and it's a profound love. It just felt like these are 2 characters that were thrown together. They had an attraction that bloomed into more of a relationship, and then when the story ends, they're going to start a relationship.
Yes, this felt more like an opening scene to a romance rather than the culmination of it, so to speak.
Yes.
I would also say that it helps that the main character is established from the get-go as a raging gay.
Yes.
Who has the hots for, like she already has, like, she's physically attracted to the other person.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little easier for, like, the suspension of disbelief when you are like, okay, there's already that sort of lust thing going on. And also the story takes place, because this is an epistolary thing, she's writing these letters and stuff. The story takes place over a longer period of time, and you don't actually know how much time has passed between each letter, in a sense.
Right, exactly. So, like, we get the sense that these characters have spent time together versus, like, you know, a lot of these, just by nature of being a short story, tends to be one snapshot in time. And that was an issue with the Salt, whatever one that I already forgotten, is like that one. Yeah, it's like it tries to do the whole, like, enemies to allies to lovers thing and all the way to the end of Lovers, like we are in love with each other. Whereas this one, it was the start of a romance, but also it's like, okay, I could tell from reading the story, it's like these characters have spent like months probably together interacting, so it doesn't feel like that's, you know, coming out of left field as like, oh, within the span of 2 days we go from, you know.
I also think that the pacing was really tight with this one. Like it felt like planned out. Like Freya Marsk had an idea, had like the rough structure, and she executed it well. I really enjoyed this story.
Yes.
What's your pick for the next best story of the bunch?
All right. One that I really liked was Plan Z. And
I also like that one.
Yes, this was interesting because I saw in the Goodreads group there was some division on this story, and I think also because this is a humor one.
Yeah.
But this 100% for me, like, I'm not gonna lie, it was a biased one because like the ship dynamic of this is like one of my top tier. Love it, where you have the for lack of a better word, like the chaos goblin, and then they're like slightly
Yes.
more responsible partner. Okay, you know what? I it gave me Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy
But
vibes.
yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm like,
This
oh,
was
that's
this
like
was
one of my
definitely
favorites.
Poison Ivy Harley Quinn vibes.
Yes.
And also I feel like this gave me a little bit of like almost like Foodie Cootie vibes as well, like
Yes.
FLCL. Like that
Yeah.
same sort of like you have the one character who is like like trying to take in and control all of the shit that the other character gets into and tries to retain them, and then has to like kind of accept that there are situations where the chaos goblin energy should be let loose into the world.
And I love the this was one of the few science fiction ones as well, like straight up science fiction, like Eleanor Jones kind of to me blended science fiction and fantasy because the setting was fantasy but it had science fiction tropes to it. This one was just straight up science fiction, and I am a massive sucker for the like thief cowboy in space setting trope, which definitely these two characters were. They were.
I mean, let's not talk about Cowboy Bebop because the wounds are still too fresh. But this kind of had that, like, I feel like if Spike Spiegel and Faye Valentine were a queer couple in space, this would be that dynamic.
Yes.
Or even Jet and Spike, I would say.
Yes. Yeah. Very similar.
As female characters.
Yes. This was one where I'm like, I would love more of this. I would love this as like a novella, or I don't know if this would work as a full novel, but definitely more.
I feel like this would work as a sort of series of novellas or novelettes, where we get like sort of like a monster of the week style episodic thing, where each of the stories follows a new adventure. And not necessarily even like you could have like little like bridging moments between them, but like I feel like this could work as sort of like this episodic, not really related to each other, or even like you know those kind of stories where they are not related at all, and each of them is kind of like a new legend of these characters in a sense.
Yeah.
And the whole shtick of the thing is that you never know which actually happened. Yeah. That could also like be fun.
Yeah. This one was also fun because it was one where we had an established couple. And I really liked just we got very few details about them, but it was like enough to keep me interested. Like that our main character used to be a princess, and then she got seduced by our chaos goblin and ended up giving that up and becoming like details like that. I'm like, that's just so cool. I loved it. Definitely going to check out more by this author. I haven't read anything else that they've written.
I will also say that I am always a little bit skeptical when, you know, like not all men can write women well, and not all women can write men well. And this was an example where I actually think that these characters made sense.
Yes.
And they were believable as female characters.
Yes.
Also, I will applaud the author for daring to include that these are some messy bitches who actually have like dirty underwear littering their living quarters. Because, you know, reality.
Yes. Yeah, they're messy in the literal and figurative sense of like their relationship is kind of messy, and they live in like just like messy.
Like if you don't have a designated chair that's just for dirty laundry, are you even living?
Yeah, the depression.
Like, are you even a real person?
Right, exactly.
Yes. My next one, going on a sort of completely different. Well, actually, no. Let's talk about this one first because I feel like this is kind of following the same sort of humorous. Let's take the humor road down to the last stretch. Danger Noodle by S.K. Terentiev. I really like this
too.
I love this, and I also love that this was like an actual like established married couple.
Yes,
like they're not just dating; they are celebrating their like marriage anniversary.
Yeah. This one, like, out of a lot of these, I think I said this on Goodreads, so, apologies to those who follow my every word with bated breath, repeating myself. But it felt like watching a random episode of a TV series, like, that you stumble upon. But for me, that was a positive. I enjoyed that. I was fine with it. This gave me Buffy and X-Files vibes, but with a little bit more humor. It was great.
Also, for me at least, this was a completely new to me author. I had not read anything by them before. And this story, S.K. Terentiev.
Yeah, no.
And this story kind of made me like, okay, I need to keep an eye on this name.
Yeah.
To see if they are going to write anything else or publish any other short stories somewhere, because I felt like I really gelled with the type of humor this was. Once again, that sort of Buffy-esque, snarky, but not too serious sort of humor. I really enjoyed it, and the dynamic between these two characters actually reminds me a lot of the dynamic between the two main characters of the show The Nevers.
Oh, yeah. I haven't seen that yet. But
that like this felt like that dynamic. And like one is a sort of brawler and the other is a more scientific minded, but sort of like overly excited about their like scientific work kind of person. It really like struck that itch for me. I really enjoyed those characters, and I also like I was reading passages of this story to my partner aloud because like they were funny and he was laughing because they were like the backpack of holding. Being a spirit of a grumpy old man.
That they pay in pizza. They give
and free Wi-Fi.
And free Wi-Fi. Yeah, that was fun too because this one was sort of in a modern setting, but it had those fantasy elements. So there were a lot of jokes like that, where it's like you have a bag of holding that also uses the Wi-Fi.
Also, I feel like this also had pop culture references. Like, for example, the idea that they listen to Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen when they go to fight off a basilisk in order to deter the
so they
voices that would make them insane. And I thought that was fun because Queen has that sort of pop culture relevance that is iconic. And that's what I think is kind of like when you do pop culture references, I feel like if you don't consider the relevance and the sort of agelessness of the thing, and this goes to show, like, for example, like why do Harry Potter references annoy me, but for example this one didn't. I feel like there's this, like, not to say that the other one isn't culturally relevant, but it kind of has that.
It's like too recent, it hasn't reached that stage yet of like being. I know what you mean. And
also it's also constantly marinating in its own negative juices, if you know what I mean. So one has reached a state where it kind of can't be sullied.
You're right.
Yeah,
it can't be.
undone by the hordes of evil.
Right.
Yeah, but Danger Noodle I really enjoyed, and also I really enjoyed that they were just calling the basilisk a noodle.
Yeah.
I just like it because it felt like these were people who had their own lexicon with each other.
Yeah.
And like they had their own inside jokes, and we weren't necessarily privy to the inside jokes ourselves, but like you could sort of grasp how these characters operate with each other. I felt like they wouldn't necessarily be this way around other people, you know?
Right. Yeah, because it was just the two of them for this story, so we got to really see their dynamic with each other.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this one. It kind of like, I feel like if P. Jelly Clark would write a humorous romp with like a short story humorous romp about like this would be the type of stuff he would do. Like it felt like very, you know, that whole episode of the week of a TV show, very self-contained and but fully realized.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's a sign of a good storyteller.
Yes.
That you can create a fully realized concept within this short amount of time. And this was also like, this wasn't a very long story either.
No.
What's your next pick?
Yeah, I was trying to decide because I've got two of these that I'm kind of going back and forth on. So I'm going to say The City Unbreachable. And the reason I was going back and forth on that one is because I don't feel like it fits with the theme of the anthology, but I really enjoyed the story. Because that one didn't really have a romance in it. It was
it was kind of like different.
Yeah. So it's like within the context of, you know, picking a favorite from this collection, I'm kind of torn on choosing that one just because like I don't feel like it matches the theme, but I would be lying if I said it wasn't one of my favorites because I just really enjoyed the vibes of that one. I also that it's really
I also like that one. I have marked it as one of my favorites as well. And this was actually like this was my first thing that I have read from Yoon-Ha Lee that I read from start to finish, because I DNF'd the Nine Fox Gambit back in 2017 when I tried to read it, and I was like, this book is making me feel actively very stupid about myself. And I feel and like an idiot. I feel like I don't understand anything, so it wasn't fun to read it. But this one I feel like it clearly has this inner logic within this world that I don't feel like I am fully privy to, that I don't think I know the complete logic of this world. But that didn't deter me from enjoying the story. And I was actually kind of interested in this whole idea that the ship is a ship, but it's sentient and it chooses its own fighter.
Yes.
In a sense. I actually kind of like think that the sort of like soulmate connection or the not romance necessarily, but was between the ship and the other character.
Yeah, that was the impression I got as well with like the romance element of it. It was just kind of like I don't even want to call it a romance. It was more of just like a connection, like a understanding, a bond.
I mean, there is a possibility that it could turn into a romance at a later date, but to me, this one was like politics.
Yes. Yeah, this was just straight up politics and with a really cool setting.
Yeah. This is also one of those things, like I'm wondering now, like I know that Rachel from Kalanadi has read the entire Machineries of the Empire thing and all the short stories and stuff. And now I'm wondering, like, how does this relate?
Yeah.
How does this relate to that world? And I'm now wondering, like, should I go back to the Machineries of Empire? Is this like is the impetus that will make me read that thing? Because I'm afraid it was very hard the first time. It's for smart people.
I will say another thing I really liked about this one is our main character was older in this.
Yeah.
A lot of the other stories we had characters that seemed to be early 20s to maybe like mid 30s, whereas this character, I don't think we got an exact age, but she was a warrior in the past and has been injured and has been involved in politics for a while. So she's been around.
Also, she was a disabled character who wasn't pining after her lost ability.
That is very true. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was actually like she had developed a new set of skills
Yes.
that was her strength, while still embracing some of her old skills. And
Yes.
There were things like, because she's a sort of like a wheelchair user in a sense, and there are moments where she contemplates about dueling in her like current state and like strategizes, and I thought that was a cool touch. And it wasn't really like how do you say, like stressed upon or really like pointed towards like look at what I'm doing, but it was just there.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was a nice touch.
Yeah. And it just made sense, like in the context of the story, is like, yeah, this character who has been a fighter is going to think in this way when she's faced with a situation. Yeah.
This was also like a dual POV story.
Yep.
Which was very unique in this collection.
Yeah.
Like it had both of the characters had points of view. Which was really interesting to me. So yeah, I really enjoyed, and this was also less humorous. Like it had
one of the more serious ones. Yeah.
I also feel like this one was very much that sort of like an Asian period drama, but make it space.
Yes.
Like I got many like Chinese and Korean drama feels. Even though it wasn't like fully stated like outright, but I just sort of had that the way the characters were interacting, and it was all about like trying to figure out the like inner workings of the mind in a sense. So
it reminded me of a Chinese period drama, totally, but like in space. With
I really liked
elements added to it, which was very cool.
Okay, like my final pick is Little Birds by Cara Patterson.
I liked that one a lot as well.
This is also, I think, similarly to The Unbreachable City, a story that's not about humor, and it's more about like the world is cool.
Yeah.
And the way, like, this is kind of like alternative history, Turkish Ottoman Empire, like, but if Ottoman Empire had an air force made of kite-flying women.
Yeah.
And it was so cool.
Yes. It was so
and also,
angsty and bittersweet, but like perfectly.
And also happy ending. Like this is one of the things, like even the stories that had angst had happy endings. Like this collection isn't something that will ruin your day.
No.
It like and this one I think had the most like how do you say, like, for example, the main character changed a lot.
Yes.
From the, like, she starts as one thing and she is completely different by the end of it.
Yeah.
Which I thought that it gave more weight to the stuff that that pair of them had to go through in order to be together. Like, in order to be together and come together as a fully fledged, like, equal partners, they both had to lose something, you know?
Yeah.
And they both had to kind of consent to make that sacrifice happen.
Yeah.
I also like really liked the writing style. This was another author that I had not heard about before, Cara Patterson.
Yeah.
And I also marked her as an author that I want to keep an eye out. The writing style and the mechanics of the world reminded me a lot of like Tasha Suri's writing. Like not in the way that this is like a complete copy or anything, but like just the feels, the vibes.
Yeah. No, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's a similar not fully poetic, but using like you get a real sense of like scent and object and color while reading this story. Like they're kind of used, I am not describing this well, but they're used like metaphorically, like in the descriptions of the story, like Tasha Suri does. So I thought
it has a very like a vivid aesthetic. Like you instantly feel like well maybe, but because there are readers who can't really visualize as well. But I feel like the way it is told is very like it has a certain aesthetic and vibe. Like it's very atmospheric. Atmospheric is the word I want to use.
Yes,
it's okay, very much
like I was trying to find an example of like let's see.
I'm gonna see also
yeah, like I'm just kind of glancing through this and like a lot of
there's like, for example,
like, if a character comes up to someone to talk, the first thing that is described is not what the character looks like. It's like they're described by the main character hears a whooshing of their skirts and then looks up. It's a lot of like.
There's also like the like when these soldiers, these Air Force soldiers are coming into the like women's quarters. It's like the youngest were scarcely beyond the first bloom of womanhood. Yeah. So it's like it gives that very like distinct feel of okay, first bloom. You are referencing like puberty and stuff. So it's like very much like it uses poetic metaphor.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm trying to. Like the flurry of skirts sounded like the wings of pigeons as they fell in.
Yeah.
And also that is like that, like like the Home Alone 2 feeling with the pigeon lady. Like you get the like. It like I feel like the story really played with your senses. It made you kind of recall something.
Yes.
Like for example, I don't know if anyone else does this, but when you hear that sort of description, you start to like recall like, okay, what would that sound like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this was no Sarah J. Maas where you're wondering like, oh, he was growling. They're like.
Yeah.
What
is that facial expression? Yeah.
Yeah. So it made sense internally.
Yes.
Yeah, so those were our favorite and least favorite stories. So I think we could like sum up our thoughts, like just generally after reading this collection. Like what are your feelings? Like how like what do you think you most gained out of it, and like going forward to reading like other anthologies, like what's the most like inspiring thing that this one did for you?
Yeah, I think this one just kind of felt like that it was like eating a warm soup, but like in my soul. So like sometimes the short story collections, or at least a lot of the ones that I tend to read, I read a lot of speculative and sci-fi fantasy ones, but even so they like make me think about the real world and things that we encounter, whereas this one didn't do as much of that. Like I don't think I'm going to be in my bed at 2 a.m. thinking about like one of these stories and like dissecting it, but it was like nourishing. It was just a nourishing, wholesome experience for the most part. And I enjoyed it. I think this would be a great one to read for someone who is feeling themselves slipping into a slump, or to break up stories. Like, if I had planned this out better, I might have read this like in between reading other like more dense, more angsty, serious books as sort of a little bit of a pick-me-up in between. But yeah, those are kind of my overall thoughts on it.
I mean, I have to agree in that sense that when I first started reading this book, I was coming off a binge of about 6 or so Berserk volumes by Kentaro Miura, which is a notoriously grimdark and gross series, featuring with a lot of like gore and violence. So I also noticed that, for example, looking back, like the very first story, Margot Lie's Guide to Dueling Unprepared.
Oh, yep.
Do we have a echo?
I'm not getting one. Are you getting one?
No. I don't think so. Okay, now I can't hear anything.
Echo.
It went away. Okay. But yeah, the very first story when I read it, it was like very sort of like pining and happy and humorous and stuff. And when I first read it, I didn't like it. But I think that was just because I hadn't adjusted my own expectations yet, coming in from reading like super graphic stuff and like and also a lot of like graphic nonfiction and stuff. And then when I read what others were saying about it in our group discussion, I was like, oh, I need to go back and sort of skim. And then I started appreciating it more. Still not my like favorite story, but I could see that my expectation was sort of warped by my previous reading experiences. So this was very much like a good pick-me-up, sort of like a palate cleanser. Like this felt like sort of like resetting my brain and my thought process from all that horror that I had been reading. And after this, I could go back to like well, not to say that I have continued on with Berserk, but like, I think I could now stomach a bit more of like hard-hitting stuff again. Because, having some sugar in between the spicy bits.
Right.
So yeah, and I also think that because the stories were not like super complex, I think this would be like a very good collection if you are just getting into short stories and haven't really read short story collections. Because me personally, the reason why I started the Shorts and Sorcery book club in the first place was that short story collections and like have always given me a lot of like anxiety, like how do I fare with them and stuff. And this one is like, I feel less work intensive in a way.
Yes.
So I think that this would work very well for someone who has never picked up a short story collection in their life. And the most of the stories, because they follow a kind of same theme, you don't have to do as much rewiring between stories.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this, like, in terms of who I'd recommend this for, I mean, anyone that, honestly, if you find the premise interesting and you like the vibes, appropriateness wise, like this wasn't too explicit. There weren't really any graphic violence or sex scenes from what I remember in here. So like I would feel comfortable like a teenager or even like maybe middle grade, depending on their reading.
I wouldn't recommend this to like a middle grade, because there is still like a lot of like death and stuff, and especially like, for example, a story written by Neon Yang has a lot of like pretty terrible, like
Yes.
parental abuse and stuff that's not handled in a way that a middle grade book, for example, would handle it.
Yeah, I think
But
that's
I
fair.
do think that this has like young adult crossover appeal.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking kind of like maybe that like 15 age
Yeah,
range.
like 15 years and onwards, I think
Yeah.
would be a pretty good, like, solid age range. Not
Yeah.
younger than that. I feel like you still kind of like have to be comfortable in yourself in order to read some of these stories, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely crossover appeal across age demographics.
Yes. So yeah,
even though
yeah.
Even though it is targeted towards adults, this is an adult
Right.
speculative fiction collection.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just say with that like maybe someone who currently reads YA and you're looking to read adult fiction, this might be one of those stories that's a good, or books that's a good jumping point, because it's, yes, they're adult fiction, but like you said, they're written, they're very focused on emotions, they're written a little bit more simply, they're short stories, so it's less to digest. So I would definitely recommend this for someone who is looking to like get into adult fiction as well, but they don't want to jump right into maybe something more complex or more dense. This would be a good
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. And I think because it's a mix of different authors, you really, for anyone reading this, you're going to find something that you like.
Yeah,
And
you're most likely going to find at least something you enjoy.
Yeah.
Most likely.
Yeah.
And the scope of these stories is kind of like you have the very humorous ones, and you also have angsty ones, and more like down to earth ones. So I think the scope of emotional breadth is like pretty varied.
Yeah.
So that's our thoughts on the actual book. But before we go, what other media, like, you can recommend anime, TV shows, other books, like, based on this like premise and this short story collection, like this whole femme, more like sword femme and like princess dynamic? What other media would you recommend to people if they have read or if they enjoy a premise like this?
Yeah. Well, let's just get that out of the way. But obviously, I recently read a comic called Goodbye Battle Princess Peony. I never know how to say that flower. But that story and a lot of stories by that author have this very similar dynamic. So that one specifically is a magical schoolgirl setting. So we've got our main character is a magical girl, and then the love interest is a villain, but it had a similar dynamic, and a lot of other things that the author has written has similar-ish dynamics, like not exactly the same, but that kind of vibe where you've got definitely more of like the you have like the brawler versus like the thinker strategist, that kind of dynamic more so. Like Road Queen is another one that they wrote that has that dynamic where they're both kind of the fighter trope, but one is more of a brawler and one is more of a strategist.
I would also say
and they're all sapphic, by the way, but
like obviously.
Yeah.
I would want to recommend The Nevers, a TV show. It is not explicitly stated, like, both of these characters have like male crushes and stuff, but they are like, I feel like in future seasons we will start to explore these characters' relationship a lot more. Plus there are plenty of like side characters and stuff who are like queer in some way, but the dynamic between the main characters is why I would recommend The Nevers. And like I have really enjoyed that TV show.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like alternative history
Mm-hmm.
/ science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I have really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Another one, probably like Motor Crush, has a similar thing.
Yeah.
It's more like science fiction, and it's very campy, but also like super. Also, oh my god, how didn't I think? Oh my god, what is the? Is it Iola? What's the? Oh my god, what is the name of that comic book series where the captain of the guard is taking
Isola.
Isola, yes.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that one's literally bodyguard and princess. So
yes,
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, and then earlier, Rebecca said, "Distant Gardens, Hope Punk, Solar Punk with lesbians." So yeah, I am really excited to pick up that one. Maybe it will be featured in this book club at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And the next live show will be happening on January 8th. I will be joined by Kristen from Kristenal SFF Reader, and we will be discussing Choreo issue 1. It's a science fiction magazine all about including authors who have like immigrant status or are diaspora writers, etc. So it will be a very interesting read. And Jena, before we go, you can plug all of your things. Where can people find you, and what are you up to? What is a project that you are excited about that's coming up?
Yes. So you can find me at Bibliofilth here on YouTube and Twitter. I don't really have anything planned because I don't really do anything. I just kind of exist and then occasionally post content. But and we're kind of at the end of the year, so I'm trying to think if I had anything planned, but not really. You can also sometimes find me in the World Hoppers channel. I've shown up on a couple of streams there discussing various bookish related things. So that's usually where I can be found online.
And also occasionally Jena will tier rank the fashions of Star Wars, so if you are into that sort of thing. So I am still waiting for the episode on Palpatine's wardrobe.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I actually have, I don't have a concrete date for that, but I do have planned to do one for the Star Wars villains at some point. So Palpatine will be included in that, along with General Grievous.
Does General Grievous have multiple outfits though?
He's just got one. He's got a very stylish little cape.
Oh, so he will just go straight to S tier.
Right, exactly. And also, not to spoil it, but an S tier for any Star Wars fans. Count Dooku has a set of pajamas that he wears, so those are obviously also going to be an S tier.
Okay, I am excited about this episode whenever it will come up.
I encourage everyone unrelated entirely to this, just Google Count Dooku pajamas. It's very delightful. That will be the next ranking video. Oh, and I sappically related, I do have a video on my channel about Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. If you like those characters and if you've been watching the animated series, recommend.
And very much a properly like a dynamic that this anthology is all about. So very, very appropriate in that sense. So I think we are just about ready here. Obviously, on my channel, the Book Finch, I will have some wrap-up stuff coming up and stuff, but expect December to be a little more quiet, because of the holiday season and stuff. And I'm glad that you could join us and enjoy. If you are watching this afterwards, I'm glad that you found this recording of the live show, and have a safe and fantastic rest of the year, and take it easy. And be kind and be gentle to those around you. It's been a rough couple of years, so let's keep it hopeful and work through this time together. And see you. Bye.